Hi everyone, comic book reviewer here. This time, reviewing on the film The Disaster Artist. Now, as you know, The Disaster Artist was a comedy drama film that was co-produced and directed by James Franco, as well as being based on the events of Greg Sestero and Tommy Wiseau, who basically worked together to create the 2003 film The Room. And the best way I can sum up how Disaster Artist is about how an egotistical person tries to prove himself that he can be a better director than everyone else, then thinking what people are trying to tell him. And the premise of the film is meant to take place in the start in 1998, where we see how a 19-year-old Greg Sestero ends up meeting Tommy Wiseau in a sort of acting class, and we kind of see how, because of Tommy's influence, as well as his way of kind of making Greg think they can go the distance in Los Angeles, we see how Greg and Tommy basically audition, all trying to kind of get these big parts, and we do kind of see how Greg at first is getting all these talent agents come in, and it's kind of clear that Tommy is getting annoyed that he's getting constantly rejected because of his bad acting. He doesn't really think things through. And over the course of the film, we do finally see how Tommy decides to make his own film, and where it leads to all sorts of problems with productions, people around him getting fed up with his behavior, and the whole point of the film is Greg slowly starts to see that Tommy just sees him more as an accomplice and someone to kind of feel like he has some importance in his life. And I think this happens a lot with writers, directors, as well as these upcoming actors. They want to believe they can go the distance. They want to believe that they've made this big masterpiece. But a lot of the time, there's going to become issues with productions, problems with kind of the studios. A lot of time, there are these big shot actors who think they can go the distance. The same with directors. But there's always like these controversial things that get them into trouble or ruin their career. And I think really this can happen to anyone who wants to try to improve themselves that they can do better. I think it does kind of remind me a bit like what happened to the guy who did Fantastic. You can tell he really wanted to do a simple superhero film, but because of studio meddling and a lot of problems with himself, ended up hitting him rock bottom. And I think the whole point of Tommy Wiseau is that, his film The Room didn't seem like a bad idea. A lot of the time, it was just kind of throwing in what he thought could work. A lot of the time, you can kind of get this sense that he didn't really stop to take time with his story or think things through. And I think really a true director or a true writer will take time with their story, improve on it, but also take some inspiration from what they see, but know what to work with. I think it's like looking at Fizzy Pop. Fizzy Pop knows her characters well. Blitzo is obviously supposed to be a bit of this smooth talker, this bit of this guy who inspires Millie and Moxie to be these kind of potential assassins. But there are moments Blitzo has to open up about himself, but he knows he is struggling with his own personal demons. I think it's like looking at Luce from the Owl House. Yeah, Luce's character is that she's supposed to be a bit of this over-the-top, imaginative kid, but I think what the writer gets right at is showing the dangers of letting your personal fantasy world get the better of you. Again, writers take time with their characters, but they know what they're supposed to be. And you can tell literally right away that Tommy Wiseau was quick to rush things to prove to people he could make something better, and it gives you this sense of egotism. And I think the rest of the film is trying to be this simple, straightforward, but simple story about a egotistical man able to manipulate people, but he also tries to prove himself that he can go the distance, but never really stop to think if his ideas were really going to work. And that can lead to a lot of problems that nobody really wants. So I think Disaster Artist is a cautionary tale about not going too high the distance, being careful not to kind of go too far, and sometimes to dial it back if people are trying to offer you words of advice and encouragement. So I think the film definitely deserves a thumbs up. Still good and still enjoyable. So, Comic Book Reviewer here, signing out.